Welcome back to the Detroit is Different podcast studios. And in studio, I have somebody that's a native Detroiter that traveled a little bit of distance to get this way, but travels often because home is where the heart is and also where family is and so much more. This is the only place where you could get that Belle experience. So definitely those things and many more, but a myriad of things. Let's stay there. So coin collecting, knowing a whole lot about certain relationships and health systems, and also housing systems. And then all around how to get value and connecting to Black storytelling. Jen Ingram, how are you today?
I'm amazing. It's so great to be here. It's truly an honor.
Thank you. And you've traveled many places on many stages, talking to many different folks across the world.
Yeah.
So I'm humbled that you were here and you were like, yeah, we're going to do this. And I'm like, I got you. So we in effect, and it was already a good pregame discussion about things.
Yes, absolutely.
All right. So you kind of very familiar with these Detroit is Different experiences.
Mm-hmm.
So you already know what's coming first is your family and the roots to the D.
Yes.
How did they go about getting here? How many generations deep? What's the story?
Absolutely. So I will start by saying I'm a fourth generation Detroiter, born at Sinai Grace Hospital. It was Sinai Hospital back then. But, I'm a firm believer in the past informs the future. And so the story of my family is one of migration. It's one of seeking access and opportunity and continuing to strive for more and better. And so that story started in Hattiesburg, Mississippi with my great-grandparents. My great-grandparents, they partially raised me, very impactful in my life. I had the great pleasure of having my great-grandmother blessed to guide our family through, my 20s, which is rare. I oftentimes say that the best parts of me were nurtured by her. And I fundamentally believe that my gift of public speaking also is from her. And so in Hattiesburg, Mississippi, she was raised by her aunt, who was one of the only Black midwives in Hattiesburg that was oftentimes called upon by white folks and Black folks alike, which was unheard of. And she had a telephone in her home in the 1920s again. Which
so that alone
rare.
Was like,
yes,
was, I know everybody that's young watching this, that would be like having, what would be the equivalent? It would be like having like a virtual reality, augmented reality center in your crib right now.
Yes, no, absolutely. And so she was educated in the Hattiesburg school system and went on to go to college, which again was rare at that time. She was an English teacher at an elementary school in Hattiesburg. And well into her 90s, she would recite poetry from memory. And when I was a little girl, she would, sit me down and I would say, Paul, do the Bridge Builder, say the Bridge Builder. That is a poem that, talks about someone that's older, right? That comes to a bridge. The bridge is broken. This older person has the ability to repair the bridge, right? And I could cross right now. I would be safe, but I know the person coming behind me would not be able to cross this bridge, especially a young, excited person that's trying to get where they're going. And so the last line of the poem is, I'm building this bridge for them. And so, again, growing up, that was definitely something that stuck with me and informed me and how I have approached life just in general of being a bridge builder. Fast forward, my great-grandparents meet. My great-grandfather was the milk boy that would come by and finally asked her aunt, can I take Ernestine out? And long story short,
Ernestine, that is an old school name.
Ernestine
was,
yes.
What that was back in that day was what I guess in my era Tanisha would be.
Yes, definitely. And so they ended up getting married, were deeply in love. And my great-grandfather had a small, little shotgun house, built for them over time. And they were, happy enough. They had family, they had community, they were raised there, they went to the same church, Friendship Baptist Church, which they walked to, right? It was a different way of life.
Okay, I want to frame a couple things that you uplifted in this, just to frame stuff for people. So first, a shotgun house. People have heard that before. The concept is basically you could open the front door and the back door, and you could like shoot a shotgun through it. Now, I've heard it so much that means that somebody must have did it. but that the thought process is like the structure, and it was like architectural designs of these structures that could go up relatively fast, but also be very sound structures, because even in arcs of not necessarily in Detroit, but if you go further out, like in other communities, you'll see them. But definitely in the South, you'll still see many of these shotgun homes, like a New Orleans and different things and different spaces and places. You'll see these are the ways that people did live. And then you also said the Milk Boys. So on the side of our houses in Detroit, you'll see like these chutes in some spaces and places. Milk would be delivered oftentimes to different homes, through the Milk Boy. If you've ever seen the movie Dead Presidents, people watching this, Lorenz Tate's character is doing that before he goes on to serve in Vietnam. I just want to frame that so people kind of,
we bring it to present time, right, and put it in context. And so with that, they were living a happy life. Roughly they were also in the South. Right? And the Jim Crow South.
Yeah, Hattiesburg, Mississippi. We've had a couple people on here that uplift that. Alabama and Georgia, definitely the number one places where Black folks come here. Yeah. Mississippi, usually a little further west, but Hattiesburg has been uplifted in this story.
Yes. And so, while you may find safety and community outside of that insular group, there was a very present threat.
Mm-hmm.
Right? A threat of physical violence, a threat of psychological violence, and it was I won't go down that path, but they had a neighbor, right, Black man who had acquired a truck, a pickup truck, and he started hauling goods in the neighborhood, for different Black folks, right? Economic opportunity. He was an entrepreneur, right? And some white folks came to his home in the middle of the night, pulled him out of his house, and nearly beat him to death. And it was in that moment, in that exchange, that my great-grandfather said, and this is a story that was recited to me over and over again as I was growing up, because as a little girl, why did you leave everything? Why did you leave your family? I, asked that question repeatedly of them. And he would always say, I wasn't the type of man that would be able to live in the South. I would have been killed. And so understanding that, it was not, oh, I can't wait to leave my community and move north. And so as we talk about the movement of people, we oftentimes use the term migration. I am a firm believer in that most folks that came north from the South during that time frame, the 1930s and 1940s, they were not migrants, they were refugees. No different from other folks that leave their home, they leave their community, they leave what they know in search of something better. And that was very much so the story of my great-grandparents and several other folks that moved during that time frame.
I would definitely want to add other context to this. So right now, the popularity of the movie Sinners definitely puts a light on Mississippi towns, as it's set and placed in one of those Mississippi towns, hence that Delta blues, the Delta, the Mississippi Delta River, it connects it. But what delivers in it, I'm definitely spoiling the movie if you haven't seen it yet, which you should have seen it by now. But in it, you have both brothers played by Michael B. Jordan, Smoke and Stack.
Yes.
And Smoke and Stack, these brothers definitely are, let's just say, what would we say? They're some of their entrepreneurial pursuits may put them on the other side of the law, and that takes their travels to Chicago.
Yes.
And then they return back to this Mississippi town. This Mississippi town, they end up creating a dance hall, juke joint style space, and in purchasing it, they're purchasing this space from a realtor, let's just say that, in the town, and it was just uplifted that many said, okay, they're connected to the Ku Klux Klan, and the Klan will come back. So throughout the film, you'll see just basically after like one night of business, the Klan definitely comes back with the intentions of definitely stopping whatever progress would have been made from this business. Now, this is theatrical, but this is very true. This is an era of sharecropping. If people know what sharecropping is, it's technically like a lot of people that were enslaved in the same spaces or like maybe a generation after would share the crop. With the families of the people that were enslaving either you or your ancestors. So now, like in sharing the crop, meaning that, and sadly, this happens in Africa and a lot of South America to this day, and even people have uplifted in Florida to this day. So you share the crop, meaning you're going to do the work. You're going to do all the farming on it. After you get the yield from what that is, I'm going to make a decision on how much I'm going to pay you for the yield of what that is. So sometimes they say, no, half of those are bad potatoes. So we're only going to pay you for half, even though you picked a whole barrel of potatoes. So things like that would be those same dynamics. Also, you can only imagine the tensions between this space where you were enslaved, or you may go like one plantation over, but it's still the aura and the presence of what exists in the thick of that. Especially we're talking about the 30s or the 20s. Even to this day, 2025, my most recent interview with now former Mayor Chokwe Antoine Lumumba of Jackson, Mississippi, and some of the things that he's facing currently is thick as racism and that institution plays such a strong lens in what the American story is.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, I'll digress just briefly. I just got back from Virginia, so I've been in Virginia all week at a conference, and did a tour and actually walked the slave trail. Visited the hollow grounds of Devil's Den, right? Between 300 and 500,000 enslaved Africans were brought in through that port. And so, to your point, it's the American story. You know, it is our history. And it is oftentimes, viewed as a business, right? It was an economic decision by many, and so
beyond it, not just economic decision. I mean, definitely not going Umar Hidden Colors here, but it's just real. The Wall Street is built. The first thing traded in Wall Street is us.
Yes.
The basic principles of accounting to this day are from enslavement. Managerial skills and connections is from enslavement. Like all of these ideas in so many things in business, even the relationship of like, okay, the North is good and the South is bad. The South was basically the space where all of the goods would be collected, and the North was where a lot of that stuff would be processed. But the relationship is still very strong between both entities, relying on the whole concept of it. I'll even go as far as usually the argument I make of back to history, his story. His story of American is the American Revolution was these revolutionaries wanting to have freedom without taxation against the crown, meaning Britain. And it's told like a George Washington and a Paul Revere, from those announcements, basically take on these redcoats. But the reason that was able to happen was because you had other European nations willing to invest in these American revolutionaries. They weren't willing to invest in these American revolutionaries just because they was like, yeah, we don't like Britain either. It was the thought process of you have sugar, you have cotton, you have tobacco, you have, all these other goods that we want to get as well. So we as the Dutch will give money for your revolution. We will give money for you to take up arms and fight Britain. We're not going to fight Britain with you, but we'll give you money. So even the investment that starts America from the American Revolution, the only reason they were willing to invest was because they had enslaved peoples in land that was being cultivated. So like to take one away from the other, you're not framing it right, but it's back to his story.
Yes.
So yeah.
We're telling her story today.
Yes. I like it. I like it. I like telling her story, but I like to really drive home some of the framing, because I don't necessarily know if we're looking at it from the if we're only looking at it from that lens, we're not seeing the macro of the reason why America was invested in the first place. Still dealt with a lot of our people.
Oh, no, absolutely. I totally agree with you. And it's something that a lot of folks don't know, right? Our stories and the history that we were told were not put together in ways that acknowledged and, expressed the fullness of that story.
Mm-hmm.
And so it is important to continue to highlight these pieces that maybe we heard a piece of that in history class, but maybe not that whole story, especially not put together. Or you might see snippets. You mentioned the movie Sinners. I will use this as a transition. You saw Smoke and Stack talk about, everybody said, I thought you went north. I thought you went to Chicago. It's great. It's so much better. And said, no, same thing.
Yep.
Right. So fast forward, my great-grandparents get to Michigan. Well, my great-grandfather left his wife and his young daughter in Mississippi with my great aunt. So with the aunt that raised my great grandmother, while he came here to try to
get established.
Absolutely, he came with his brothers. They already had a cousin that was here, and so this notion of community, right, was not optional. It was essential to the safety and the community and the ways in which folks were able to get going. First place that he laid his head was with somebody, right, that had already come. And so when we think about the stories that we all tell ourselves about our origin, we all have been helped by someone. And so, when you look at the time back then, having nothing, right, and being able to find your way, navigate your way, and having just a couple people that you can call on. The feeling of loss and having to be separated from your family, that wasn't optional. My grandmother, which was the baby that he left behind, my mom's mom, that was his firstborn child, and he missed first year and a half almost of her life. 2 years of her life. That wasn't optional. My father would want to be separated, but he was driven by the hope. The hope that any future kids and generations would have more access and opportunity than he saw available in the South. And so fast forward, finally was able to save up enough money, sent for my great-grandmother and my grandma. And my great-grandmother cried every day for weeks. And finally he said, if you want to go back, I will send you back.
Hilarious.
But I'm not going. And either you settle in or, we'll figure this out. But, and so again, she didn't want to be away from her community, her family, or her students. But they knew that it was, at that time, the best shot they had at building something more. When I was little, I asked a bunch of questions. I've always been very curious and inquisitive. And so I'd say, well, where did you live? And my great-grandmother would always say, well, we had a little room, the bed folded out of the wall. And so in the daytime, I would push it up, and then at night, pull it down. And we had chinches. And, I said, well, Paul, what are chinches? Called my great-grandma Paul. Well, they were little bugs, and they would bite you at night. And so upon doing some, research years and years later, they were bed bugs.
I was guessing they probably were those.
But what I found out, I'm like, well, how did she know the word chinches? So I look up chinches. It's the Spanish word for bed bugs. And so before Black people were living in these, poor conditions, because those were the only places that would rent to them, there were Hispanic folks that were workers and that were here in the North that were doing these jobs. And so it was a word, she knew the word bed bug, but she still called them chinches. And so even understanding the ways in which culture came together in that migration story and who were the folks that were, in place and found, refuge, prior to. And so fast forward, save up for several years. They were able to move a little bit. One of the people that had come earlier bought a set of row homes, and so they rented there. And so they rented for a while until they saved up enough money to purchase their first property here, and that was in 1951. And so my great grandmother always said, and so even today being here, I drove by the house. I wanted to live in a single family home, over off Boston or somewhere. But your granddaddy said, no, pretty much they probably couldn't have afforded it. But he said, I want to be able to ensure someone else has housing that comes behind us. So he purchased a duplex. The duplex is located at 3011 Whitney. The house still stands as a shell of what it was. But when I reflect back, and if you were to ask me the question of where, is my family home, not the spirit, but the physical place, I would say it's at 3011 Whitney. That was the first home that I knew, the first home that was purchased, by my family. The place that there was always room for everybody in that little 2-bedroom house. They converted the back off the kitchen. It was a little sunroom or closet initially. They converted that into a bedroom, right? You made space, and they raised 5 children there with 1 bathroom, 5 bedrooms, but having space downstairs for others that, needed housing. And so they rented it. And for all the years that I can remember them being there through the early 2000s, they always had a renter.
Landlords, which that's a whole nother
house
colorful
hacking
story.
is what they call it today. You live in one side, got somebody else paying your mortgage through rental. But yeah, and so he was an early entrepreneur. Fast forward the story a little bit more. He ended up starting one of the first Black-owned dry cleaners, Wilson & Sons Dry Cleaners.
Wow, okay.
Here in the city of Detroit. He ended up passing it down to his son, my uncle, and
he was and son actually got a business too.
Yes,
okay.
But his son had other dreams. He wanted to be an entertainer and a singer, and was with the Capitals for a little bit. So he did all right. And I think one of the other things that we talk about is sometimes folks, and especially our ancestors and those in the generation before us, work so hard to build something, to be able to give it. And sometimes folks have different dreams. And so that's something else that's tough to reconcile. And even looking back in retrospect, I asked my uncle, do you wish you would have kept the cleaners? He's like, yeah.
I would say so much to add in that. So like in short, so first let's address what I think is something that needs to be known. And this is beyond anything. Bed bugs. You think you don't like roaches. Hey, bed bugs is a serious situation for anybody that's ever seen them, okay? Dealt with them or whatever. Address that fast, right? And then also you talk about a lot of the Spanish. Detroit has a deep tie to a lot of Puerto Rican roots and Mexican roots, but some of those Puerto Rican roots go back further. As I've learned, like just in my tour with Tanya, AGI, husband Luis, like they are doing a lot of work in development and just showing me more of that Southwest connection. But the other relationship to uplift, whether that is Puerto Rico or coming from Mississippi, America at the time, we're shifting from like an agricultural economy to an industrial economy. So a lot of those men, because this is primarily beyond this is completely a male workforce because other things are happening in history at the time. It's other shifts that are happening too. So that a lot of those early agricultural to industrial workers, the other stories that aren't told. I'm gonna even go as far as to say even some of those Polish and Irish immigrants, it's tough. Hence, you have the inception of a lot of those industrial barons like Carnegie investing in public education. it never necessarily was as much of a public good as much as it's like, we need these people to read instructions so they're not dying. Because, OSHA was definitely not around back in the 1940s. You know what I'm saying? So
Yes.
some of that stuff, people working in coal mines. A lot of Black folks are definitely working in like foundries. And many people have done research on this. Like some of that early industrial work that we're taking on,
Mhm.
mm,
Mhm.
it's heavy. It's the type
Yeah.
of stuff that
And
makes you want to
dangerous.
pivot. Definitely
Dangerous.
dangerous. So more of a testament to your family to shift and then even grow a business out of that in different facets in real estate and having that vision. So
Mhm.
that just says a lot too.
Yeah, I
You know?
appreciate that, and, I know I spent a bit of time on the origin story, but it is the foundation.
Mhm.
It is where I learned so much,
Mhm.
and have imprints of that journey, that also are reflected in my own life.
Okay.
My grandma and all my great aunts and uncles went to Northwestern.
I'm
Uh
for that. The big NO. There we go.
my
That was
my
the old
mom
Northwestern, I'm sure.
yeah, yeah, my mom, also grew up in the neighborhood, went to Central.
Mm.
My dad went to
Ooh.
Central. My dad went to Central. I see you got on your U of M, sweatshirt. My
Yeah.
uncle Tommy went to Central, went on to play for Michigan. He
Okay.
set 2 track and field records that,
Ain't that
are
something?
still in place and was, football coach at Cass Tech.
Okay.
So nod to the family, right? And the wonderful things and impact, that Detroit produced.
Mhm.
I would not be sitting here today, had it not been for the journey, that they walked.
Okay. So with that, I love the richness in this story. But now we can
Yeah.
in that framing and having that relationship, let's talk a little bit about you coming up.
Yeah.
What neighborhood do you remember as far back other than Whitney
Yeah.
for you and your journey, mom, dad, brother, sister? What do you remember as far as neighborhood for you?
Yeah, what I would say is, we lived in the city until I was in 4th grade.
Mhm.
And so what I remember most, my grandma lived in a townhome she rented.
Mhm.
I'm pretty sure it had some kind of a rental subsidy maybe. I remember when it was so exciting she, qualified and moved to the 3-bedroom from the
There you
2-bedroom,
go.
and we lived there, right? It
Mm.
was me, my mom, and my uncle for the first few years of my life. It
Wow.
was right there off of, Outer Drive in Hubble. And
Mm.
so, you have been there actually
Mm.
years and years ago, we were kids.
Okay.
But I used to have birthday parties and,
There
I
we
remember,
go.
like, 2-year-old birthday party, there's a picture of, your grandmother holding me and Donna on one side, and you were there as
I'm
well.
in the mix.
You were,
I'm in the
as a
mix.
youngin. But that was one place, we moved around a lot,
Mm.
right? My mom was, younger when she had me, and so also seeking opportunity, we lived downtown, for a little bit in a loft. I remember, my aunt, who was, probably the person in my family that had the highest degree of education. She had got a
Mhm.
master's degree in math from Wayne State. She had a home in Rosedale Park. I spent a lot of time there. I remember learning how to ride a bike, up and down, the street of her house on Rosemont.
Okay.
And so, West Side primarily, are the places that, have the most memories, coming up in the city.
Okay, and then also what you even uplift in that situation, and as many people in that situation as you know about housing, affordable housing, and the transient nature of like if you are moving,
Mhm,
and many people are like this
mhm.
in Detroit now, many more than before. It just the impacts that it can have on the continuity definitely of a child in education,
Yes.
because that sometimes becomes a big it just becomes a big dynamic, being the new kid,
Yeah. Oh,
and being the new kid.
again and again and again and again and again. And even maintaining relationships. We didn't have cell phones, and so friends that I made in one place, it's time to move.
Yep.
Right. And so it definitely had an impact on me on some of my most formative years. And, I also attribute, that young experience to also my openness to moving.
Mm,
Right. It was not something that I was like, oh, yeah, I'm going to move here. But it was like, okay, I don't know anybody there, but that's okay. I can move to Minnesota. Okay.
mhm.
I don't know anybody in Cincinnati, but okay, I can move to Cincinnati. I don't know anybody in California, but, I've always said the calling is what moves me.
A and I love the way you even shape that, because oftentimes, even in those situations that your mother was in with your uncle, I think you said, so, like, having that 3 bedroom situation where technically on paper they're like, ain't nobody else supposed to be in here, but like how you work that and it's a part of our family, my family, even like the way sometimes things are anchored
Mhm,
and move around. It was so funny. I was in the bank yesterday
mhm,
and or my credit union, right? So I'm in my credit union. The lady in front of me is getting offered. She was like, "Well, Miss Jones, you got enough money where you could qualify for this or qualify for that." And she's
mhm,
like, "Can't do it. I'm gonna just be honest with you because my daughter shares on this account with me, and my daughter is getting disability money. And if my account goes over a certain amount of money, then it impacts things."
mhm,
Now, I'm just putting all of these
mhm,
things in layers of sometimes we think things,
mhm.
and it's definitely from a good place, but we're functioning and we're moving around,
Navigating.
but we're navigating spaces and places that definitely aren't necessarily designed for us, but we making it for us.
Yeah, and just like my great grandparents did, navigating, finding a way, making a way. And so, we talk about grit, we talk about resilience. I believe Black people,
Oh yeah.
it is innate, it's in our DNA,
Hmm.
right? Not because it was, oh, let's learn how to, become resilient. No, it was survival,
Yep.
and the ability to build. And I think that, my mom always said, I'm a firm believer in, a parent wants their child to be better, to go further faster
Hmm.
than they did. And, I think generation after generation, the things that we've been taught, both explicitly, nobody sat down and said, this is how you navigate. You witness, you observe, you take that in, and it starts to shape your understanding, your worldview, and how to navigate and move through the world. And so, I think that for me and my story, uh, very much so many of those lessons that I wasn't sat down and taught these things, but they were things that I observed and I witnessed, taught me how to navigate in life. And I'm grateful for all of those experiences. It really did shape, my understanding of what was possible, and also where you might have fear. It removed some of the fear that, might be for other folks that haven't had those experiences.
Okay. High school. Where you
Yep,
go for high school?
North Farmington.
What
Yeah.
was that like?
Ah. Um, I would just say, so I mentioned in 4th grade, we moved, to the suburbs.
Hmm.
I remember being in elementary and middle school. Again, I moved around a lot before that, but that was, I would say the first kind of progression through a school district,
Mm.
from elementary school to middle school, so on and so forth, out in the same general vicinity. And so I remember being one of only, a handful of Black
And that's
students.
why I was gonna ask, what was
And
that like?
so, it was interesting, right? It was almost like I lived 2 lives. On the weekends, I go to my grandma's house, I come back to Detroit and hang out, and, I got cousins and time with family, and then Sunday night, it was time to go back
It's like,
and live in between 2 worlds.
it's like that, that Dave Chappelle joke where he's like it's like where he was like, "No, it's my best Dave." It's like, "You go hang out with your white friends as a kid."
Uh-huh.
And then you open the refrigerator, you like, "What is this?"
Yeah, yeah, and so it really was, living between 2 worlds. And, I was the apartment kid,
Mm,
right, in an area, that was predominantly, homeowners.
mm,
And so also that dynamic of not only being one of only a handful of Black, kids, but then also being the apartment kids. And so
mm,
when we think about narrative and stereotype, and even the way that, young people are experiencing school today, there are all these dynamics,
Mhm.
right? And there are ways of othering and ways of belonging. And so, do I belong because I live in this area and I go to this school district, or am I other because I'm an apartment kid and I'm Black? And so, understanding those nuances also is something else to navigate,
Mhm.
right? And how do you find community? How do you build trust? How do you, extend those relationships? And I was really grateful. I was always into art. I loved art, and so uh,
What form?
painting, sculpting.
Mm.
And again, in middle school, this was a school district that had all types of resources. And so, I mean, I was in every art class I could take,
Wow.
every opportunity I had. And I was a poet, and so I was in poetry competitions. I remember my freshman year of high school. My teacher actually came to me and said, Jennifer, I would love to nominate you for this program. It's an artist intensive, it's over the summer at Michigan Tech.
Hmm.
Right. And so freshman year of high school, I spent 3.5 weeks at Michigan Tech. Again, I think
Mm.
there were maybe 2 African American students at this camp, but some folks were in photography. Some folks were, painters. I was a poet. And so we had this experience. I had these experiences in life that, exposed me to broader mediums that, I connected with folks from across the state at a young age. And so made a couple friends. And, my friend would come down from an area up in northern Michigan. I remember the first time my mom said, "Jen, did you tell her family that we like? Did she tell her family we're Black? Because she's
Hilarious.
coming to bring her down for the weekend. Like,
Hilarious.
yeah, they might need to know that before they get here."
Got that right.
And so, right, but these are the types of things that I would say really did shape my youth and
But
my
also that
educational journey.
but also the willingness to be in that initial discomfort of any social situation,
Yeah.
because we're all faced with that. I think when you're younger, you wrestle with it more emotionally head on. But I think even as adults, walking in large rooms and spaces where you don't know anybody
Hmm.
is heavy.
Yeah, let me out one better on you. You don't know anybody and nobody looks like you.
The double, yeah.
Right? And so that also has shaped my calling and my life's work. I did not know that when I sat on my first diversity committee in elementary school, that would be the initial exposure to what would change my life and the impact that I've been able to have in communities across this country.
Okay. So after high school,
Yep.
what's the thought process? You got artists in you, a lot of art. What's the focus? What are you thinking? Where do you go?
What am I thinking? I'm thinking I want to be an art major. My
Mhm.
mom's thinking I'm not paying for you to be a starving artist and go to school to learn a
Hilarious.
craft. And so,
Hilarious.
what I would say is, I went to Eastern Michigan University right after high school.
EMU.
Yeah,
Okay.
and spent the first semester there. And long story short, Thanksgiving break rolls around, and I'm like, I'm not going back.
Mm.
I made the choice. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna go get a job, and I was working, and I had was dating someone, and I'm like, I don't want to go back, right?
Mhm.
And at the time, I had life stuff to figure out. I needed to figure out who I was. I needed to, outside of who I was expected to be or who I was conditioned to be. And so when I left Eastern after that first semester, let me just, paint this picture for you. Like literally, I did not go back come Monday morning. I went back in January when I got a notice saying like, somebody else is supposed to be moving into this dorm room now. You have abandoned it. Like, do you want
Mm.
your stuff? I did not know at the time, and again, outside of my great aunt that I mentioned, my family, nobody had really gone to college,
Mhm.
and so even knowing, how to navigate, I didn't know I had to drop classes, so I just stopped going.
Mm.
So fast forward, I worked for a few years and decide, all right, I'm gonna start taking classes again. At the time, you had to be in school to stay on your parents' health insurance, and so I was like, okay, well, let me at least take some classes so I can maintain health insurance. Was the thought. Started taking classes and went to Oakland Community College for a
OCC.
while.
I'm a community college kid. OCC, what campus?
So I went to which one didn't I go to?
Where did you start?
I started at Oak Ridge.
Okay.
Royal Oak campus. Made my way around. You had to go where the
class
courses
was.
yeah, and so
OCC, and my cousin Tanya went to OCC, I remember, and started there. So it's right in I remember the campus in Royal Oak, then that campus like right behind Northland, and then
Northfield campus.
It's
Orchard Lake and 696.
Okay, so you were just bouncing around.
Wherever the classes were. So a lot of the art classes were taught in Royal Oak. So I remember taking sculpting and, 35 millimeter black and white photography classes at the campus in Royal Oak. I took math and science, at Orchard Ridge, right? So literally whatever campus. And then for a lot of my administrative classes, I remember taking econ at the Southfield campus. And so, again, moved around, ended up graduating with an associate's degree from OCC. Funny story, at that same time, my mom decided to pursue a culinary degree.
Interesting.
So we were going to OCC at the same time and sat next to each other at our OCC graduation.
That's powerful.
And so that was both of our first time walking across the stage, and it was together to obtain a college degree. And so at that time, that was my mom's first degree as well.
And how much time did pass between Eastern and you going back to OCC?
Yeah, I started taking classes maybe a year later. So I took about a gap year.
So you took like a year to...
Well, I took maybe one class, two class, whatever was required at first. But then, right, I increased the schedule.
Okay.
Yeah. And then my mom kept going. So she went to Central after that and kept going to school. And, a little bit of time passed. I'm like, okay, I think I'm ready to, now go, and get my bachelor's. And when I thought about, when I did well at OCC, I had, maybe a 3.7, 3.8 GPA, and they had this reciprocal relationship with a lot of the in-state colleges. So I could transfer like almost 100% of my credits to a 4-year degree. And so started looking, I'm like, at this point, I've been working for a while. I went from, kind of 2 part-time jobs to a full-time job and a part-time job. I was a home health aide. I took care of an elderly woman with Alzheimer's. She was actually the first Black charge nurse at Detroit Receiving Hospital.
Wow.
And her husband had been a postman, and they became like family. But I took care of her during the day, and then I would go to class. And this is when I was at OCC, and then at night I worked midnights, and I had gotten a part-time job, and that was for Henry Ford Health System. So I was on the east side at a long-term care facility, and I worked midnights there 3 days a week.
So you are in that caregiving space with elders, which this is also full circle. You having that relationship with your great-grandparents and your grandma.
Yes.
Because it definitely takes the right disposition. The same way they say that, like, you got to be the right person to deal with the littles. You got to be the right person to deal with the bigs as well. You know what I'm saying? It's a different type of energy, and especially knowing what Alzheimer's and dementia has impacted my family.
Yes.
And it's heavy, especially for the family that's caregiving.
Yes.
But caregivers, it can be just as much of a task because what's happening with it, and there are different illnesses, diseases, things people struggle with, but it's not so much information out there about it. Other than it's tough because the only thing that's usually said about it is we can possibly slow this down.
Slow down the plaque development in the brain.
But
it's no cure.
It's no cure. So we're walking in with a reality where it's been diagnosed that it can only get worse. And how people function with it, what is remembered, what's not remembered, a good day versus a bad day, a good moment versus a bad moment. It just takes a lot. So
yeah, no, it definitely does. And when we talk about this notion of community, I oftentimes say that I'm the product of a village. And that village was not limited to just those that were my biological family. I was in my early 20s and, navigated trying to figure out life, you know, and being in that position, it was, you know, powerful to, you know, see this 1970 something Lincoln with Emmy, which was her name on the license plate. That was who they were. And I was now entrusted to give her family some relief and help care for her. And I loved working with Miss Emma. Her family became like family when her husband actually passed before her. They invited me to ride in the family car with them.
Wow.
I remember, and she was not able, they thought it was best that she not attend the service, but they said, Jennifer, I know, you know, take the day off, we'll get somebody else, but we want you to come to Pete's service. We want you to ride in the family car with us. And it just meant the world to me. And so they had 2 kids, one of whom, you know, the daughter ended up taking in Emma. And so then I, instead of going to the, you know, their home, started going to the daughter's home to continue. Then she got moved to her son's home. Then I kept going to the son's home. So again, I had an opportunity to continue to be of service, and also I learned so much from them. Right, their son had been a successful, I think he was an architect, and you know, picking his brain and asking questions. I remember at a birthday dinner, I was maybe turning 21 or 22, and they came to the birthday dinner, and you know, again, just a beautiful relationship. And even after that, we stayed in touch for a while. It's been a little bit, you know, most recently, but yeah, it was just such a impactful. And so we think about jobs, right? Sometimes it's not the job, it's the experience and what you gain from that. What I learned were the same skills that I now apply, you know, 20 years later in work that I do, thinking about people, right? Thinking about compassion, thinking about empathy. I think one of the greatest degrees of trust is someone entrusting in your care, someone that is vulnerable, right? And in that instance, it was someone that, you know, was losing their memory and forgetting, you know, not just people, but how to eat, how to move in activities of daily life. And so patience, right? Time management, and also agility. I might have one plan, you know, for how my day would go, and Miss Emma might have another plan, right? But these were things that I learned during that time frame. And then the part-time job I had with Henry Ford, there was a full-time position that was opening up at main campus. So I went from working at a, you know, rehab facility on the east side to getting this position at main campus. And so that was a big deal at the time. You know, I'm 22, 21 years old, and, you know, I'm moving. And at this time, I think I was just in the process of getting my associate's degree, go to Henry Ford, and they had tuition reimbursement. And so also when we think about our, you know, we work for these organizations, what are the benefits? What's the total rewards package beyond your total or your compensation, right? They gave me, I think it was maybe $2,000 per year, right? Which didn't cover tuition, but it was a little bit. It helped out. And so I took out student loans for the rest, deciding where I would go. I went back to Eastern. When I went back to Eastern, I had a negative GPA. I busted my butt to turn that around. And I did not want, you know, that decision to reflect who I wanted to be. And so the discipline that I adopted, I work full time at main campus. Again, being vocal about what you need, right? I talked to the nurse manager of the department and said, listen, I want to go to school. Some people have been here for years. I don't expect that will be me, right? This is a stepping stone along my journey, and I would love your support. Whatever schedule I needed to be able to make my classes work. We talked about going to different campuses. I mean, now I'm at, you know, a 4-year university.
Yeah,
Some
you
class
got
at
it.
8 a.m.,
Yeah.
you know, and I'm supposed to be working a day shift. So I, you know, had different schedules that I worked. And so I'm grateful for the investment, you know, that not just the organization made monetarily, but for the support that I received from the folks that I work for. Fast forward, I'm there, you know, finish up. I'm getting to my last semester. One semester, I completed 24 credit hours.
Wow, that's a lot of classes.
Because of my work experience, I applied to have work that I had done in service excellence, which was like patient engagement at a department level, apply to the internship portion that most of my classmates were doing. You know, most folks aren't working full time. You know, they were full time students. And so I'm like, how do I leverage this opportunity? After talking to one of my mentors that I met at the hospital, she said, well, Jennifer, like, if you need a capstone project still, I'll let you volunteer with my department. Head of the department, head of service excellence said, come I'll share with you some of our pain points that we don't have capacity to address. And so through that experience, just before graduation, my final semester, I worked on my first, enterprise-wide initiative. Now, did my position reflect the work that I had the opportunity to do? No way,
Mm-hmm.
right? But also understanding relationship and how you build relationships with folks. Every time I passed, this person's office, hey, Kelly, this is what I'm doing within the sphere of influence on my department. And it became something that I created a resource guide using and leveraging data, patient experience data, that allowed us to proactively address areas of concern that we were hearing about post-discharge while the person was still in-house.
So everything you're sharing, it really shows so much of two things I want to unpack in reference to this. One, I'm one of those later students too. So sometimes, like what I call a later student, like fresh out of high school to college, would have definitely not have, I think, really vibed with the way my thought process is. But if you're a later student, some lived life experience, especially if you're like live life and work situations, you can really apply some of this stuff that you're getting that could be theoretical if you're just a student
Mm-hmm.
and make it very practical.
Mhm.
So now you're tying things to real life experience. So a capstone project really, I remember my capstone for my master's. So capstone projects are like larger projects where you can get into in-depth analysis about organizations. I want to say my capstone was on the company that I don't know if a lot of people know this. The same company that the investment group and organization that runs Aldi's is also the investment group and organization that runs like so many other stores too, like Trader Joe's and things like that. So like if you ever even look at the design of a Trader Joe's and an Aldi's, you think about that next time you're both, right? But that work directly. And then furthermore, the other layer I want to add to this during the work at Walsh, you get introduced to this concept of what we call an entrepreneur. So entrepreneurs are outside of entities and they offer, and they're still interacting with businesses, most of them, I know I am, to sell their goods. An entrepreneur works within an organization to be just as creative and innovative and taking those risks, but within an organization too, which a lot of entrepreneurial skills very much like it's it's like the cable package of like all this stuff still checks off other than like 4 or 5 things in the entrepreneurship. But entrepreneurship, I do think, is a great gateway that more people that are considering entrepreneurship, I think, should really explore what opportunities and risks they could take to deliver programming for their business that they work for. That's all.
No, I totally agree, and would love to come back to the entrepreneur dynamic because I years later did become an entrepreneur.
Mhm.
After years of taking that same early experience, right? I'm young in my career,
Mhm.
but when I did graduate, from Eastern, I had a bachelor's now in healthcare administration. After having worked in healthcare for 8 years at
Mm.
graduation,
Mhm.
right? So working and going to school full time. To your point, I was able to take those same concepts I was learning in the class, apply them in my real life work. And so I thought that I would go and work for service excellence after that. I worked on this capstone project. And this also goes back to the thoughts and expectations and what we think we will do.
Mhm.
And so often God has other plans.
You got that right.
And so I had applied for a position with service excellence down at the Wyandotte campus. Had a great interview, felt really good about it. At the same time, my great-grandmother was dying of cancer,
Mm.
and I was helping care for her.
Mm.
And so I will never forget my last interview. Um, I finished up the interview. I still was dressed in a suit. I had on a blouse that my great-grandmother had bought me when I got my first job that I needed, some decent clothes
Yeah.
for. And I went to go see her, and that was the last day I saw her alive.
Wow.
I told her about the interview and how excited I was to apply these concepts. And I have actually an audio recording of that time with her.
Hmm.
And she was fading.
Wow.
And I love you. I'm so
Mhm.
proud of you.
Mm. That's heavy.
Yeah,
That's heavy.
yeah,
And it also, your life story, into what you've shared just in your journey, like every step of the way from caregiver
yeah.
for others to now caregivers for your own family, the woman that had a lot of caregiving
Yes.
for you.
Me.
So the roles reverse
Yes.
in so many ways. So now you're looking at, after experiencing that relationship with Miss Emma,
Yeah.
to your great grandmother, to school, like you're seeing the health system process in a whole nother level of understanding
Mm.
people.
Yes.
Cause it's definitely a lot of the numbers and a lot of the a lot of numbers, a lot of jargon,
Yeah.
a lot of chemistry goes into this, but the people dynamic, and that's where, especially in our community,
Yes.
that connection is not, that's what we feel is so missing,
Yes.
because Black women, we spoke a little bit about
Mhm.
this, feel so unheard. As you were watching some of the interview I did with, shout out to Lisa Whitmore Davis and her journey as a survivor,
Yeah.
because we're not heard, because it's not enough people like not looking at this like this ain't a system. This is not a, this ain't an oil change. This is,
Tune up. It's a
yeah,
person. It's a
this is,
human.
and more than my, it's who they are, the relationships they have, the role that they play.
The experiences that they've had, the trust or distrust of institutions. My great grandmother had been a patient of Henry Ford Hospital since I was a kid. Some of my earliest memories were going up to main campus for doctor's appointments, and I would be excited if I got to get a slice of pizza or baby Pan Pan from the Little Caesars in the hospital.
Mhm.
Um, but to your point, when she was in and out of the hospital, treatment, so on and so forth. And because I worked at main campus, she would oftentimes be hospitalized there.
Mm.
And again, we go back to relationships. I know that patients aren't heard. And I'm not, this is, no direct reference to any one system,
Yeah.
any one institution, but I understood the ways in which people were engaged in their own care or the lack thereof. I, understood the ways that doctors talk to and sometimes at patients. And so what I would do, and I knew my grandma was there, I might have school or something else, my great grandma, I would, call one of my friends on a different unit, say, please go check in on my grandma. Hey, she's in this room. So I had a whole little network of folks that worked in the hospital that would just go pop up. Same thing with my paternal grandmother. She would go up to Henry Ford Hospital and hey, I'm here. And one of my other cousins worked in radiology and would call folks in, and I would call folks that were up and inpatient, to come in and check in on your people. I saw how, even working at a nursing home, people that had visitors were treated very differently than those that did not have visitors. So if you've got loved ones that are in nursing homes, that are in hospitals, go see them. It may not seem like a lot, but not just for them, but also the dynamic and how they are viewed and portrayed, especially if they are a person of color. Bias is real, right? Bias in healthcare is real. I've done extensive research on the topic. And so it has very little to do with, oh, they're a good doctor, or, oh, they've got a good nurse, right? Bias is bias. And, I want to just, level that by saying, interrupting some of the stereotypes or narratives that exist. And sometimes I remember my grandma, I got an auntie that in and out of hospital, they're trying to do this to me, no. But a doctor might receive that as, oh, you're not being compliant with the care that I have, prescribed for you to get better. Well, that no might be, I'm scared. That note might be, you didn't explain that in the way in which I understand it. And so in that other episode that you were just referencing, we talked about cultural competency and listening, right? Listening to what the individual needs, but even beyond, you got to get to a space where the person will talk and y'all can have mutual understanding. And sometimes family members are translators between, oh, my auntie, she's not saying she don't want your care. She's not saying she's not going to take this medicine. She's actually allergic to the dye that's in most medicines, and she doesn't know if this medicine has that same dye that she might be allergic to. And she might not even know how to ask that question in a way in which informs how you would adjust or modify her care. Did you hear her when she said, I got a bunch of allergies? Yeah, well, Right? So it's just all of these nuances, and oftentimes family members. I've worked in large healthcare systems. You've got some family members that translate into different languages for parents or grandparents that may speak a different language. Similarly, family members can serve as cultural translators, helping to be a bridge between the patient and the providers. They may not trust providers. We know about the experiments that were performed on Black women. We know about Henrietta Lacks, whose cells were stolen. And so understanding the distrust that might exist within a system between an individual or patient based on lived experience, based on story, based on not understanding or not being engaged in a way in which reinforces, a sense of comfort and belonging, and then can lead to the trust in you as my provider providing this information. Some folks might not even speak up to a doctor because we also have this dynamic of my doctor knows right and my doctor's always right because they're the doctor and they're in a position of power. And so I'm just going to listen. Okay, this is what you told me to do. And you may not speak up. So again, this notion of being a cultural translator, regardless of or that extends beyond just language, but also being able to support family members. And another notion of this is, well, shouldn't the hospital be doing that? Shouldn't doctors be required to do that? In most medical education in the 2010s, cultural competency was not a required course to become a doctor or a nurse.
Mm-mm.
And so it was organizations that then took on the responsibility of understanding and ensuring and providing learning opportunities so that folks were able to have at least some exposure. Not necessarily because we think you need to think and believe this way. And this gets into the notion of some of the things we're seeing now. It was not forced or required because we wanted to, shift how you believe or your philosophy. We want you to be able to treat our patients in ways that provide equal health outcomes because we know that the bias is reinforcing what we now know as health disparities.
So much to add. And thank you so much for eloquently putting that together. And things I've touched on before, not just in Lisa's interview, but other interviews, the Dr. Lovejoy interview. And back to this is not as specific to a specific system, though many people have raised challenges about Henry Ford's health systems. And I've even interviewed the president of Henry Ford, Bob Rennie, for a forum connected to New Detroit. So definitely looking to be a lot more inclusive just from working with New Detroit in what diversity is. And we're talking about something that is institutional. Yeah. So hence this goes back to the roots of where we started about America itself and its relationship with racism. So any institution. So I think that that's the health institution. That's the educational institution. Like all the times when we talk about Wayne State, it's not like Wayne State is like, oh, Wayne State is an outlier. No, this is justice institution of justice, criminal institution, the institution, the economics institutions, like definitely banking. You know what I'm saying?
Real estate,
real estate, like housing, like all of these institutions have nuances and biases to upkeep. As I say, the design of this nation was for white men with property and businesses. So the further you get away from that, the functions just not functioning in the design of it. The analogy I always say is like you can put water in your antifreeze tank and you can drive it, but it's not designed to run on water. And that's what a lot of new things coming into these systems. So you're breaking things that sometimes people that are inside the institution don't even know are where people have those nuances. So when it comes to health, and speaking up in that cultural competency, even the design of like, I'm to the space of even the way that the structures themselves are designed, the way they look, the feel it is. I think that we're so much more of a communal people. Like, I mean, if anybody gets surgery done on them, you're probably going to go in, possibly talk to whoever the surgeon is, and it's going to be like real one-on-one. And you'll be like, yep. And then you go in the day of the surgery and it's like 15 people that you never met. You never known.
Yeah.
You about to be butt naked in front of them. So let's already just go to
and knocked out, right?
Yeah,
Under
yes.
anesthesia, so totally vulnerable.
So you're in a space like, all right, 1 second. I know cuz, and this is just back to like black stuff. You know what I'm saying? I know you.
Yes, but I don't know them.
This is what I care about most. You know what I'm saying? It'd be like us doing a business deal together
Yes.
with the most money I've ever saved up.
Yes.
And me and Jen talking, and then I'd be like, all right, cool. I'm ready to give my money to you.
Yeah.
And then the day of, I don't see you in the building.
Exactly.
But it's like, oh, that's the process. You gotta talk to these 16 other people, and then I'm gonna come in, but by the time I get in, you ain't even gonna be around. You're gonna be knocked out.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? But that's never really broken down because it's another system, I think, of the culture of the hospital that has a layer of I can't think of a better term, but just the social dynamic, it's like they're here and we're here. So to even say something, it makes you feel as though, do I even have the freedom to say something?
Mm-hmm.
Which are other layers. So now to like the cultural competency that does exist, as what Bob was really kind of talking about is a lot of the challenges that still, as much as the opioid addiction and overdosing is dropping across America, really for a lot of white Americans, the numbers are spiking for Black Americans. And how do you
calibrate?
How do you do that? Which
that's what I ended up. So that is the work that I ended up doing full time. I appreciate you lifting that up. And on this notion of cultural competency, Henry Ford was. I haven't tracked quite as much, but at the time that I was there, was a leader. We were ranked #1 in diversity and inclusion in healthcare across the nation. After I did not get that position as with the service excellence team,
God makes plans.
I ended up going to work in health insurance. So again, totally different industry.
But another piece of the puzzle.
But it was under the umbrella of Henry Ford Health System. They owned Health Alliance Plan. So maintain my seniority. I ended up working at Henry Ford almost a decade before I left, but worked in health insurance, learned a lot, ended up starting grad school, went through grad school while I was working at Health Alliance Plan. Again, open dialogue, had another really accessible and responsive and
understanding.
Person that I work for. She came to one of my art shows a year ago and surprised me. Hadn't seen her in over a decade.
That's talking about real team support.
We were very different, but she was one of the first female engineers for Ford Motor Company. And so it would be shipped out all over the world. And again, being curious and inquisitive, let's talk about our work. But I also got a lot of stories from her. She shared stories being a woman and going to some Asian countries and I'm not even having a restroom for her or not even looking at her and speaking to her. So also, I would say gender bias and the ways in which, especially in leadership in male-dominated fields, that the ways that women experience that. So early on in our conversation, walking into a room, not knowing anyone and not being in community or even having one ally that you know is an ally or person that looks like you, from a gender perspective, and especially when we look at this through a global lens. But coming back to the work, I learned a lot from, this person that I worked for, and also was able to continue to learn and grow. So for grad school, I went to Central Michigan University.
Okay.
By that time, my mom had also finished up her master's degree. She had gone to Central. And so, understanding, she was a later learner. And so having watched her, raised me as a single parent. My dad was in the military for most of my life. He didn't move back to Detroit. His family was all here, but he didn't move back till I was in my 20s.
Wow.
And so my mom raised me. I saw my dad once a year, up until the time he moved back when he would come home on leave. But watching her sacrifice so much for me to have more access and more opportunity, to be in communities that had better school districts, after having paid for me to go to several private schools when I was in the city, and also acknowledging like Sometimes the money wasn't there. And so, these decisions that were made that paved the way when I, was thinking about where I wanted to go, I could have, at this point, when I graduated from undergrad, I felt so accomplished having gone back and finished something that I felt that I had abandoned. I carried that with me and I had a chip on my shoulder. I really did feel like I had something to prove to myself when I went back to Eastern. At this point, open field, I had increased my GPA, had like a 3.0. It would have been a 3.8 had
Yeah, I
I
was gonna
not
say
had
you had
that
to
negative
climb out the
semester.
yeah, I'm
Yeah,
like, that's
I climbed out the pit, but I was proud of having climbed out of the
Mhm.
pit. Like, one of my favorite quotes is from Frederick Douglass: "Judge me by the heights that I've climbed, or no, judge me by the depths I've risen, not the heights that I've climbed."
Mm.
And so working myself out of that hole, gave me a lot of character and,
Mhm.
anyway, fast forward, I decided to go to Central, in
Mhm.
part to honor my mom. I think I maybe even only applied to 2 grad schools.
Okay.
But I decided to go to Central, really enjoyed my time there, but I ended up working on my capstone there on generational diversity and their effects on engagement of millennial employees.
Mm.
At this time, still working for Henry Ford Health System now, but I'm at Health Alliance Plan. But I served as a member of an employee resource group. These are internal groups centered around different dimensions of diversity. And at the time, I was a member of one, and then ended up becoming an officer of one of the ERGs. Henry Ford had several at the time, and they really were a bridge between community, internal community building among folks of shared identity and lived experience. And I became very active in our generational diversity ERG.
Mm.
So much so, it ended up, inviting me into spaces within the health system that I never would have had access to. The first time I went to One Ford Place, which are the corporate offices for Henry Ford Health System, was through my work as an ERG member. And so having started at, a rehab facility,
Yeah.
worked at main campus, now I am at one of the other organizations and arms under the umbrella, and now I'm being invited back to One Ford Place to engage with executives as we're thinking about total rewards packages as an example, and what are things that folks of different generations would most
Will
benefit
respond to.
from.
Mm.
And so being able to do that work at the time and then doing my graduate level work, I really was curious about the ways, because I'm a millennial, right? And there were all these stereotypes. Millennials are, they're lazy. They want things to come easy. They don't want to work hard. Stereotypes, but those that were prevalent, not just within any one organization, but just among society. You look at baby boomers. I've been here 20 years and you want to come in and get promoted, right? So these narratives that folks had about different generations. And so for me, it was a way to honor generational predecessors, but also understand the ways in which folks desire to communicate, the reward system. So for someone that's a baby boomer, if you say, pat on the back, great job for, achieving something, that might be an adequate reward system. Whereas for a millennial, we're like, wow, you did this, have a different expectation and desire on how they would like to be recognized or rewarded. You did this, this, and this. This is why I would love to recognize you. So being specific was one of the observations. Another was moving beyond just what you did to also understanding the ways in which this connects to your development that then could lead to something else, right? And so reward systems and how folks feel valued for their contributions, both those that are expected and those that go above and beyond, there are differences across generations. And I think that so often we normalize, this is our reward, this is how we, acknowledge a job well done. You might become employee of the month. That's one person, but you've got people doing extraordinary things every day. And so organizations have a dynamic to figure out. So I did my research there. Also, communication styles. One of the things that I observed were disconnects across generation. Some folks, younger generations would send, what would be the equivalent today of like a Slack message or a Teams note, quick little note, quick direct question. Whereas baby boomers, or at the time traditionalists, were also still in the workforce, they would expect the email that was formal, right? And they sent me this note, and it was almost viewed as a lack of respect. It wasn't a lack of respect. We have different, natural ways of communicating. At the time, text messaging was just becoming popular, and so short, quick messages were how engagement and communication was evolving. But the workplace hadn't necessarily caught up at resetting expectations around how different people would feel heard and what should even engage. And so with that multi-generational understanding, I really did seek to provide awareness among folks of different generations of this is how you communicate. But that's how this person communicates. And to your point, you will never become competent. So, cultural competency is the term that is most known. But cultural humility is taking the time to ask questions and sitting in a space of humility. And instead of saying, oh, because you're a millennial, you communicate in this way, it's saying, hey, listen, I know that I like emails. And even now in my leadership, when I'm meeting with new team members or folks that I work closely with, hey guys, what's your preferred method of communication? For me, shoot me a quick Teams note if it's something that you need a quick response to. I'm not the best at organizing files, so send me an email with the subject line being what you might need if it's something that you need to forward via email. How do you like to engage?
I would say clearly a lot of experience, and you're touching on so much, but I also want to frame things like I like to do sometimes.
Mhm.
Obviously, you see in the macro, and this is a sociological lens. My degree's in marketing, so marketing has a whole lot to do with society, culture, how people respond to things, and generations definitely are those marks societally. Um, as we even look at Gen Z right now and millennials, like I guess I consider myself born in '82. I'm like an old millennial,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
or you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like it's hard to, you know what I'm saying? Like
Yeah.
I'm on that cusp of Generation X, so I have a lot of Gen X sensibilities because I'm so close to that. But the reason why these generations usually carry because those snapshots and moments in time.
Mhm.
So some of the responses to workplace behaviors, educational behaviors, responses to institutions are some of those moments and things that happen. So one of the things that I've always uplifted uh, about baby boomers, for instance. Baby boomers were around in a time of like a FDR economy,
Yeah.
which is post World War II. Post World War II, America, this is back to another one of those how I see history. America like resets the global map and is able to, yeah, please do. I know this is like a moment. We
Yeah, it
getting
is.
as I'm talking, Jen's grabbing some more of as we call it, one of the world's best resources in the water, in the waters. So see, I'm going deep. She's going catching up with me with the 64. But but basically I'm saying like so the realities it definitely is different depending upon where you're at. But I'm speaking societally just as Americans. America sees a growth that's exponentially more than it's ever seen during that time because of a lot of the global circumstances that impacted what was happening in America, especially with, as we know, the GI Bill, which a lot of Black people were definitely not given access to, and brown people as well. But even with that, the offshoots of it, this is another economic term. It's called an externality, meaning that it was not intended for you to get, but what's outside, as I call it sometimes, the fries in the bottom of the bag. The fries in the bottom of the bag still created a opulence and a growth of an American economy exponentially more than it's ever seen. It's happening right now to a lot of nations in Africa. Not saying that, Africa's Dubai right now, but the economies in a lot of African nations are exponentially growing, right? So during that time, the lens of a lot of people was, let's get a house, let's get a car. This is where we need to be.
American dream.
Whereas you flip it on its head for a lot of millennials, especially Gen Z, they're at a time of this great recession, as they call it, that's almost like a depression. So people lose houses, people lose jobs, people lose cars, things that were like the buy-in always given to people of these are the things of where you could get an arc of success. Then that carries over into like what's the role of college? What is success? What do I want to chase?
Yes.
Now we get into like Gen Z saying, I want experiences because I know I can hold on to that. These are all responses, I think, to like a larger impacts of how people see society.
Absolutely.
And hence that creates the response and the motivations, I think, of people in mass, right? And even during that, social media plays a big role in how we function. But all of these things, when we create workplace culture or any
Yes.
culture, it carries.
But your point right there, organizations have to shape workplace culture.
Yes.
You bring a collective of folks together, all right? And one of the lines that folks love to say, "Oh, diversity fosters innovation." Just because you bring a group of folks that are very different together to solve a problem or do something
Mm-hmm.
does not necessarily mean you're going to get to that outcome of innovation. All right, well-managed diversity, where you are setting communal norms, where you are establishing words that allow you to name behaviors that are harmful or helpful, language that sets the tone for what we will tolerate and what we won't tolerate,
Mm-hmm.
and so setting the norms for culture. What at the time we were doing is creating a really inclusive culture
Mm.
that take into account differences, that we're seeking out ways to understand those differences and to shape new norms that were responsive and respectful of folks across those differences.
Which I have to even add this
Yeah.
as a note to pin into the mix of this. Even to think to yourself that that needs to be done
Yes.
is new for managerial culture, because a lot of the thought process of like, okay, before baby boomers is the greatest generation ever. So that idea of like the reward for your job, and it's still kind of in
Paycheck.
me, is it's your check in the first place. What are you talking about? You want to feel a certain way, or like,
Yes.
where are we even talking? I mean, we're not far removed, especially, I mean, you talk about, Henry Ford Motor Company, and I'm not, like I say, I'm not targeting Ford, but I mean, it's just known. The way of the negotiations of even people starting the labor movement was like, oh, they want to start a union, murder them. You know what I'm saying? Like, so this is all in that same arc of
Yeah.
what's seen, and it still kind of goes into the ethos and where things are at. So even introducing something like this is very progressive.
It is.
And then if you do it the right way, now people will feel more included and be engaged in this. And now people aren't going into work like, oh my God, it's Monday.
Yeah. Yeah. No, absolutely. You're spot on. And all those different expectations. If I'm a supervisor and I'm coming in and I'm imposing my expectations based on my lived experience or my generation, you should be grateful that you get a paycheck. Well, I could be a millennial and I just want to hear job well done. And the disconnect oftentimes comes in like, people don't just come in to do a job. We are humans. We are shaped by experiences. We are shaped by the norms. We are shaped by the ways that we've experienced life, and life has responded to us and our conditions and our experiences. And so, with that in mind, generationally, there are norms. You mentioned some of the norms set, for boomers. Folks often said about millennials, everybody got a participation award,
Mhm.
right? Millennials weren't the coaches. It was the parents that said, oh, everybody gets a medal because we all did it, right? But then when we come into the workforce, you don't want to say good job.
Mm-mm.
But the expectations were set, in
Before.
other
Yeah.
spaces, and so there's so many examples of the ways that this shows up. But fast forward, end up having some really great experiences. Again, still honing my skill set and the ways that I was navigating as an entrepreneur.
Mm.
The ERG, I went from, again, just kind of participating to shaping and leading a little bit more. And I was in grad school, and early on, right after I finished undergrad, I will not share this person's name, but this was another event that I would say drove me deeply. And so this is someone that's within the organization that I respect, that had talked about their journey in navigating healthcare and how where they started and got to where they were. They were a leader, and
Mhm.
so a person of black person, a woman, and so I'm like, oh, I would love to hear your journey. Like, this is where I am. I just finished undergrad.
Mm.
I know my journey and what it took. Like, all I've worked and all the things that went into that, but like I'm sharing just a little bit. And I said, I really love to continue to grow.
Mhm.
I know that there's a fellowship program. What do you think about that? I know you're in different rooms. Long story short, I left that meeting so discouraged. This
Mm.
person pretty much said, like, you'll never be able to do, X, Y, and Z. Like, Go ahead, go to school if you want to, and, like but the support that, again, I was expecting, and that's on me. I thought that I would come in and you would see me and know that, I want and just I'm not asking you to give me a job, I'm just trying to learn from your journey and how to
And that's
navigate, and that's how I was received, and that was the
uh,
feedback I got.
and that's interesting you say that because you do so much public speaking now. And sometimes, yeah, I mean, it's a skill set, it's a talent, but and then you'll get, it's easy to get in rapture where it's like, yo, and then that person is like, oh man, I was just saying that. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? So it's like it can break a person's spirit, especially if you're younger,
Yes.
looking for, okay,
Yeah.
this makes sense. It makes all the sense. I just heard what you just said.
Yeah.
I heard the TED talk. What's going on?
Yeah.
And it's like, oh man, that wasn't real.
Yeah, yeah.
But I'm guessing that probably dug deeper for you to stay in the pivot. So, like right now, what brings you here? We're talking coin collecting in it,
Yeah.
and I know it's like we're going through so many arcs,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
I
yeah.
definitely got to bring you back to get more of
Of
the
course.
pieces in your
Yeah,
story
yeah.
because you some experience in housing and
Yeah.
other spaces.
Yeah.
But let's talk a little bit about that entrepreneurship into the
Yeah.
coins.
Yeah. So, and this will be a hard shift. I will wrap up kind of where
Mhm.
I
Yeah,
was in
yeah, yeah.
healthcare just by saying, I ended up applying for that fellowship that I was curious about. Did not get it.
Mm.
However, through the meetings that I had during that interview process, I was a finalist, so I was grateful for that. But through those conversations, I made such an impact on someone else that I ended up, being invited to apply for a diversity and inclusion role, and
Wow.
that was the last role I held there. And my office was at One Ford Place,
Mm.
so full circle.
Okay.
And so for me, uh, I moved after that. I was recruited, ended up moving to Minnesota, continuing to work in healthcare. Spent 2 years at Mayo Clinic,
Mm.
2.5 years there, had an amazing experience, did phenomenal work with, some of the brightest and best minds in healthcare. And so I went from working at the number one organization in diversity and inclusion to the number one healthcare organization in the world.
Mm.
I learned a degree of excellence and gained a degree of confidence in that experience, in that leadership role that then, informed, ended up moving from Minnesota, Cincinnati, and I got into philanthropy.
Hmm.
And that was transformational. I think that a lot of the confines of the system of, healthcare or this, but I started to understand wealth different. I was working with folks that were sometimes program participants, and I was also exposed to and engaged with very high net worth individuals.
Well, I got family in Cincinnati.
Okay.
Let's say yes, yes. I got
Well, shout out to Cincinnati.
oh, definitely.
I was very active there.
Shout out to they country. They act like they not, but shout out to Reading Road. But yes,
Awesome. So
they
I know Reading Road. Yeah.
yeah. So yes, Cincinnati is definitely one of those spaces where it will be. Yeah, and talk about mixed income. You can go 2 blocks over and the largest mansion you ever seen.
Mhm.
Then 2 blocks over, it's like, okay, this definitely feels very down home. Let's put it like that.
Yeah.
That's one of those communities. And
Yeah.
it's in, as we talk about like the history and the culture of a city, it's
Yeah.
almost to the point where certain residents know it's like, I won't even go 2 blocks
Mhm.
up.
Mhm. No, absolutely. We could have a whole conversation on experiences there and the work that I did there.
Mhm.
But I will just say that experience working in philanthropy directly
Mhm.
started to. I went from being a entrepreneur within an organization to now an entrepreneur within a community-based organization. So my work as an entrepreneur is now not just impacting folks within the organization, but corporations that are, affiliates. And so I'm going and serving as a conduit between the two and engaging differently. I'm engaging with, again, not doctors and nurses and clinical staff or healthcare administrators. I'm engaging with entrepreneurs, with folks that are, running thriving businesses and also engaged on the board and, as a donor and giving back. And so those experiences really did, get me to think differently about what was possible for me. At that time, I had worked within organizations, my entire career. At the time, I was doing a lot of community work, a lot of work with different organizations in the community. I was doing a lot of speaking engagements. And, from there, I was like, okay, I've been doing these things. And I started to engage with a lot of folks that were consultants, full-time consultants. There was one woman in particular, and I will say her name, Dr. Janet Reed, that inspired me so much.
Shout out
And
Miss Reed.
taught me so much, and she's got Detroit ties as well.
There we go.
But Dr. Janet Reed is a pioneer in diversity and inclusion, the consulting field. And so I sat down and, her and I had a relationship at this point, and we went to dinner. And I'm asking all these questions, and I'm like, I'm thinking about doing this, and, I'm going to keep my job, but, I'm thinking about starting to consult, on the side, da-da-da-da. And again, with some of the advice that she had given me, it really helped me to contextualize the steps that I could take. Additionally, there was a nonprofit organization, Mortar. Shout out to Alan and Derek Brazil and all the founders of Mortar. It was an entrepreneurship accelerator. And I become really cool with the guys, right? They received grants from the organization that I was with. And, at that time, Derek Brazil was phenomenal. He and I became friends, and we went for coffee. And I'm like, Derek, I'm thinking I want to do this, but I don't know where to start. He's like, Jen, go through Mortar. That's what we do. We train entrepreneurs. So, I started down the path, but it gives me enough to get going. So take that input, feedback, continue to, to move forward. Ended up starting a global consulting business, my own firm, Calibrated Lens. And this was like 2018, 2019. And
Pre-pandemic.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Before the pandemic. And, at the time, early on, it was like, okay, how do I do this the right way? Like, I don't have any family members I can pick up a phone and call and like, how do you run a successful business? How do you scale a successful business?
Exactly.
But
That aren't even the questions that you ask. It's like, how do I get a sale in the door?
exactly.
Make some money.
Exactly.
You're not even thinking scale. It's like sale.
Yeah, exactly. And early on, I started small. And I was my product. And it was in that exchange for me having worked for organizations and been very successful throughout my career, to then becoming an entrepreneur, and having navigated as an entrepreneur. And then also starting to realize like my brand wasn't that. I am the brand. I've extended and loaned my brand. And I've gained credibility, right, by having, been within certain institutions, but I am my own brand. It just paved the pathway to a really successful consulting run. And in that process of consulting, after that, ended up losing my job during the pandemic, and started consulting full time. And then in that experience, you don't get to see work through as a consultant, right? You come in, you do a thing, you have a scope of work. And I was really longing for deeper impact. I loved consulting. I love, the freedom and flexibility I found in being an entrepreneur. I love the ability to be my own boss. Philip Holloman, leader in Cincinnati, phenomenal leader. The Urban League Center of Social Justice is named after Philip Holloman. We had dinner. He said, Jen, you're saying all this stuff. He asked me what I wanted to do. You're saying all this stuff. Just say you want to run some shit. Just say you want to be the boss. And so, again, another mark of permission to even think in that way, like, oh, I can do this, right? And so being honest about what your dreams are and what you aspire to do, and you take a little bit from everywhere, So with Calibrated Lens, feeling, I'm doing impactful work, I'm really enjoying consulting. Unfortunately, it was also, several months later, George Floyd was murdered. And so now, I have something that, an approach and experience, not just in talking about the work, but doing the work in ways that, some folks hadn't. Some folks had not been within organizations understanding how to navigate and to connect the dots. And so took a lot of the knowledge that I gained having had those experiences and created that and turned it into product. In the process, I'm traveling more. I'm exposed to different places. And, I get really curious. There was a Maya Angelou quarter
Mm.
that had come out that year. And so it was a part of what became the Women's Quarter series, and it would extend through 2025. This is the final year. And they were highlighting women on quarters. And so at that time, I was like, oh, I got to make sure I get that, right? Largely because it, had its first Black woman on a quarter,
Well,
her
that
own
and
likeness.
the relationship to poetry
Oh,
of
of course, yes.
yourself, your
Yes,
grandmother.
yes,
Yeah.
for all of the reasons. And so I, find it and get it, and some are in circulation, and then there's some that are not circulated. And then from there, I start, looking at collecting other coins. And I thought back to a conversation that I had with someone earlier on about my dad, actually. We were talking about metals. He and I, he was in the military, in the army, and he's like, yeah, I got this buddy, this guy got a lot of investments and stuff. And hey, baby, keep your eye on metals. I'm like, keep my eye on metals. Okay. I don't know how to invest in metals, but
Mm.
okay, keep my eye on it. We talk about all kind of, emerging trends and whatnot. He's like, yeah, he told me to keep, make sure that I'm investing in metals. And so I started doing some research. At this point, I am, looking at coins that, I just think are cool. But then I start to do more research and learn about the connection to precious metals and currency. Not necessarily the quarter quite as much, but the ways in which coins over time have been composed of different metal options.
Compositions.
Yes.
Mhm.
And so I start to, explore this a little bit more, but then I get curious about Black people on currency.
Mm.
At this point, we've had the initial Maya Angelou quarter. From there are other coins that start to come out. And so for me, I'm like, okay, I didn't know where to go buy coins. So end up finding out and talking to folks and starting to be in community with folks that do this. And they're like, oh, go to the Met, go direct. Because I'm buying them resale at this point. And I'm like, no, go to the Met, especially the ones that are just coming out. So then I learn about the U.S. Met and that individual citizens can purchase directly from the U.S. Met.
Mhm.
And so I started ordering coins. Fast forward, life is changing a lot, lots going on. I'm also dabbling in real estate and some other things. And, as I'm looking at, these individual coins, I'm like, there's something here, something here. But I keep, finding little coins I want. And I also start to think back to value.
Mm.
Right. So I'm now understanding metal composition, now understanding coins. I pause and, not in a direct sense, but thinking about my great-grandparents again. And when
Mhm.
I was little, my great-grandparents, "Oh, you got good grades? Here's a $2 bill. Oh, you got, success. You did something well. You got an A on your test. Here's a silver dollar."
Mhm.
Right? And these little stories, and I'll just hold on to this, right? You know, it's important. Just keep it. It's different. It's unique. Um, but and we were talking about this earlier, like, hold on to this, but why? Like, in a way that now I'm in my 30s, like, they said these things are special. Now I'm ordering these coins, like, and even, when my great-grandfather would come home from the cleaners, my grandma and my great aunts and uncles would talk about scramble night. And so on Friday nights, he would get all the change from the cleaners, put it in a Crown Royal bag, and all the kids would be home. And, it's 5 kids in this small house, duplex. And he would throw out all the change, and they would scramble, and whoever could, collect the most coins got to keep them.
Mhm.
So these little stories, right, about money. And this is also at a time where cryptocurrency and digital, credit cards. I'm not carrying cash often, but I started to think more about just like tangible money that you hold. And so collecting these coins, and I started talking to folks like, oh, I'm learning about different coins that feature Black people. And having conversation, and Really? No. Really? No, I'll find a different coin. Oh, did you know? No. And I realized that there's a whole body of Black history that nobody knows anything about. Most folks do not know, and I did not know, and I assumed wrongfully initially, oh, everybody knew this but me, right? That there are over 30 pieces of US currency, legal US tender, that feature Black people and the experiences of Black people in America.
I didn't know that.
The first was Booker T. Washington in 1946. Second, Booker T. Washington and George Washington Carver together in 1952 on silver coins, right? Half dollars. And so my mind is blown. Like, during Black History Month, we heard about certain things or, the things that parents and family educated us on. But this connection between currency, metal, Black history, my work in equity and understanding, the racial wealth gap and understanding the dynamics of assets and liabilities, understanding now as an entrepreneur, you always heard, like, most folks don't get rich working a 9 to 5. And not saying I'm rich by any stretch of the imagination, but different ways of thinking. And so I'm looking at asset classes. So now I'm also thinking about, man, I'm collecting these coins and I'm really excited. And it seems like nobody knows anything about it. And, but I'm building assets. And then I start to see the value of gold, especially during the pandemic, it increased. And so you've got silver coins, you've got gold coins, you've got alloy coins that are made up of several different types of metals. And so I'm collecting, having these conversations. And then I'm like, where can I find out where, like, all the Black coins are? Like, a full listing. And then I started doing research. The researcher in me is like scouring libraries and videos and the internet. And there was one book that I found. It was written by a gentleman who, and I'm going to introduce a term here, so I'll make sure I pause and explain it, is a numismatist, a person that collects and studies currency. And when I say currency, not crypto, that's one of the pieces of feedback, but paper bills, coins. And so I'm reading this book and I'm like, okay, this is cool. Like, he's got a lot of information, like the first Black treasurer who signed money, right? And her signature, Miss Fanny. But I'm looking and I'm like, it's 2021. It's 2022. This book was last copyrighted in 2017. It's incomplete. But it gave me an origin point or a starting point to go back. And so, again, doing research, I'm like, okay, now I know more coins that I need to go out and source and find. I joined the American Numismatics Association as an individual. I started to get their magazines delivered to my home, but my lens and the work that I've been doing around equity and inclusion, like, the light flips on. I'm like, there's a lack of diversity. Getting these magazines and understanding now more deeply the connection to precious metals and the ways that value is building and growing. And these stories are like American history. It doesn't highlight us. It's not telling the story of Black people. And so from there, I was sitting on the couch one day and, I'm collecting these coins and learning about them one at a time. And I'm like, okay, numismatics. Numismatics is the collection of coins or currency, and numismatist is a person that does it. And numismatics, it's this technical term. It's not accessible. I got stories of coins. I just shared two with you. My scramble, getting coins from my great-grandparents, my granddad, my mom. Here's a $2 bill. Here's it, right? But I have never heard this word before I start doing research and understanding coin collecting. And so I'm like, okay, I now understand what numismatics is. And it's not fully accessible. Noir, French word for Black. And so Numismatics Noir kind of has a ring to it. I do some messaging and testing. What I learned is that folks know what Noir is. Most folks don't know what numismatics is. And for me, as an entrepreneur, do I pick a product name or a name of a brand that is inaccessible and folks don't know what it means? Or do I choose to do it anyway and educate and engage folks and saying that your story is a numismatic story.
Mm-hmm.
This is what it is. And these are the ways that our ancestors, folks, my great-grandparents, my grandparents, they held on to these coins. And some people didn't just know that the coins were valuable, but they knew why they were valuable.
Mm-hmm.
And those are the folks that are numismatics community members and know that word and understand, oh, my dad had a coin car wash.
Mm-hmm.
And guess what he did? He kept all the quarters from that coin car wash because it was in the 60s, and he knew those quarters were silver and the price of silver and the value of silver would increase.
Mm.
Right? That's a gentleman I met at the airport, and I'm going to say, what do you know about numismatics?
That's deep.
And so, yeah.
So, what has been the response since opening? Who are the people that are most interested?
Yeah. And so what I would say, I started, for me, knowing nothing like this existed, having, gone through several, technical training programs in entrepreneurship, I knew the value of protecting an idea.
Mm-hmm.
So I started the process to trademark Numismatics Noir.
Mm-hmm.
I did not know it would take 2 years to get through that process.
Like that. Trademarking. Shout out to Stephanie Hammonds. I'm going to renew my trademark soon. It's coming up in 6 months, but Detroit is different.
Yeah.
It can be a process, especially depending upon the name.
Absolutely. So I start the process to trademark it. But in the meantime, I'm testing and I'm engaging. When I was ordering coins from the U.S. Met, specifically limited edition coins, the first coin that I ordered in bulk was a 2023 Ohio dollar. So there's an American Innovation Series, and it's an Underground Railroad coin. It shows 2 chains breaking, and that is their state dollar under this program. So I ordered in bulk. And so create a Instagram account, and, I start taking coins around and just having conversations. Hey, you want a coin? Yeah. Can I tell you a story? Like, I'll give you this dollar. And so having conversations with folks, people were blown away. 98% of people did not know that there were this many coins that feature Black people.
I know I'm in that 98%.
Similarly, a couple, people knew like of a coin. And what I heard most frequently, and this is one that, I'm like, what do you know about Black people and money? Well, Harriet Tubman is supposed to be on a $20 bill. That was probably the most frequently, when I said Black people and money together, what I heard most frequently. So fast forward, going through the trademark process, I've gotten sweatshirts made, and now, I'm continuing to build my collection. So from that time in 2017, when that last book was copyrighted, 40%, like the number of coins that feature Black people and experiences and their experiences has now like increased by 40%. Between 2017 and 2024, 2023, like every year there were coins coming out. And so when I looked at that book, I'm like, a limitation of this product is that it's a book. So every year, you have to update the entire book and, would have to reprint. And I also was getting like, I got this deck for Christmas from one of these professional groups I belong to, Rest is Resistance, right? The deck. And I'm looking at these cards daily. And so I have this idea to not create another book, but instead to create a coin card deck.
Cool.
That features each of these 30 plus coins.
You got some with you now.
Let's see one or two. Absolutely. And so this is the Numismatics Noir coin card deck. They come wrapped in cellophane. And for me, I would say it's an educational deck. So who's most interested? Folks that are curious. Like people that are curious about Black history. I'm calling it and consider it the hidden figures of U.S. currency.
I'm with it.
So, you can see here that each card literally has an image. I'll hold it up this way. An image, description, the year minted.
And it breaks it down.
Yeah, the metal, the composition.
I like it.
And for me, I'm an educator. And so, there also is a glossary. That includes some of these terms that I've thrown around. It includes an overview of Numismatics Noir. And there are really, I would say a few key strategies
Do you
within Numismatics Noir.
do you take your collection and like do exhibits and stuff like that too?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. And so, right, 4 goals of Numismatics Noir, right? Introduce coin collecting as an asset building strategy and a point of entry for investment in precious metals. 1.
Okay.
2. Increasing the diversity of coin collectors by sharing knowledge and visibility of Black people in currency. 3, inspiring pride and ownership, right? This is a piece of history. And having a tangible asset you can pass down to future generations. And understanding and knowing the value and the why and being able to fill in that gap. And then last but not least, introducing coin investments as a pathway, one pathway, not the answer, to addressing the racial wealth gap. This is a space that folks have largely been left out of. And the most direct connection to, I would say, precious metals and Black people specifically. I think about We Buy Gold signs. Like in the 90s, I remember starting to see them go up everywhere. Right. And coins, right, can be gold. They can be silver. But as we think about the precious metal, gold is a precious metal. It's limited quantity, right? $350 for 1 ounce of gold in the 90s. Fast forward, when this coin card deck was printed, it was actually the last thing I updated because the price of or the value of gold moves daily, like the stock market. Same thing for silver, moves daily. So I got the highest and closest value amount at the time that I finished this.
Yeah.
It was literally, and I will read, $2,700 in February. Today, last week, gold hit a new all-time high. It's now valued over $3,300 an ounce.
Yeah, and many people in investment. Shout out to my homie Mike Will, that's Mike Willingham of Michael Rose Artistry that designs a lot of jewelry. So I found out a lot more about value of that. My dad follows and buys certain precious metals too. It's a lot into that industry.
Yeah, no, definitely. It's a lot into that. However, it's largely inaccessible to most Black folks.
I mean, like, back to another one of them institutional things. And now you're creating a gateway. And I know we getting to a wrap. I gotta bring you back because it's so much more.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
But with it, how do people connect? How do people get the product?
Yeah, definitely. So Numismatics Noir on Instagram. You can order the coin card deck. I am wearing our Her Story Inspired My Story shirts. For everybody that was waiting on that $20 bill with Harriet Tubman, little known fact, she is the first Black woman on a gold coin for her own likeness. Harriet Tubman is now on 3 pieces of U.S. currency, legal U.S. tender, a silver dollar, a $50, and a $5 gold coin. She's featured on this t-shirt. You can go to www.calibratedlens.com. And then there's in the drop down a tab for Numismatics Noir. You can order gift boxes. I've got for Father's Day and Mother's Day, did gift boxes with the coin card deck. The other cool thing, if you order the deck, yes, this is an educational tool, but I also am giving away a free Noir coin. So I call them Noir coins. Those are the coins that feature Black people. Again, some of them, if you look at the backs of your quarters, you could probably find some of the quarters that are included in the deck. But I also have the dollars that are not in circulation anymore. You can get an Ohio dollar. You can get a George Washington Carver Missouri dollar free of charge with the purchase of a deck.
Okay. Yeah. Oh man, I'm interested. You actually provided a gift box, so y'all will see me wearing the gear in and around on runs like I usually do or episodes. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. I really do appreciate the time. Each of us has a story. And one of if I could leave folks with maybe two or three things, share your story. It may not seem like much to you in the moment, but the more honest you are, people might look at you at a certain point in time, but not knowing your backstory and what it took to get there. And it could really change somebody's life of what they even believe could be possible. Second thing, we are in, very uncertain times, especially economically. There are so many different types of investments, crypto, stocks, volatility. One of the things that was most impactful for me is looking at the consistent way that precious metals have appreciated over time, and the safety in that. And so, again, think about assets, right? Things that continue to grow in value, as well as things that you can hand down. I have so many items, artifacts, as I like to call them, from my great grandparents and from family members that have passed on. Some of which are coins. And so there's so many things that you can pass down with something that continues to grow in value, and explaining why in that process. And then last but not least, love and compassion, right? Resistance appears in many ways, but seeing folks and engaging and advocating for what you know is right, but also leading with love and compassion and empathy for humanity, for people. People are hurting right now. Like, things are in disarray. But what I fundamentally believe is we've gotten through worse times. We will get through these times. And what got us through, right? Love and compassion.
Definitely, I uplift all of that, and you definitely piqued my interest on some things that I did not know anything about. Yes, I definitely want a George Washington Carver dollar. So
got one in your box.
I love it. I love it. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. So with that being said, classic Detroit is different questions. First one. Very first car, year, make, and model, year you got it.
2002. Brown Oldsmobile Cutlass Sierra, not Supreme. Wished it was a Supreme, but it was a Sierra, and it belonged to my great grandfather.
Okay. All right. Where's the first place you went when you got it?
Oh gosh, probably one of my friends' houses. I don't remember.
All right. You're the DJ at the end of the fireworks. Woodward and Jefferson. Get to play 2 songs. What songs you playing?
Definitely some Big Sean.
Okay.
Like, Big Sean stays in heavy rotation, and probably some Motown, right? It's so foundational to the culture. I'm a big Stevie Wonder fan, so probably some Stevie.
Okay. All right. And last question. You could rename Woodward after one Detroiter. Who would it be and why?
I would probably name it Wilson Avenue. And that's the last name of my great-grandparents.
I'm with it.
Yeah.
I love it. You've already explained why. So I love that. Thank you so much. And we definitely, we got to reconvene. And it's all types of people. When I put this interview up, I'm going to connect it to be like, yo, I think y'all need to
appreciate
do some work.
Appreciate it. Yeah. Educators, folks from museums. I do, again, own the complete collection. I'm seeking opportunities to tour the collection. I've had some early conversations with the Charles H. Wright Museum, but looking for, various partnerships, as well as, groups that do a lot of public speaking. So there is an educational component that's available for folks. If you'd like to bring me in to speak, as well as if you're having an event, to bring the collection in cases, as well as the decks. So happy to continue to engage with folks beyond this.
I'm with it. With that being said,
Detroit is different. Detroit is different. Detroit is different.